And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis showing, again, good sea ice-free area here north of the Bering Strait up to just off the Cape Lisburne area. Another area here off the western Arctic coast extending up into the northwest there. And still some ice in close to the coastline from Cape Lisburne to Point Hope and then down the northwest coast there in toward Kotzebue. And from there, looking at tonight's weather chart here, showing a front redeveloping here through the central interior, extending back toward Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. That's going to increase rain later tonight in across south central Alaska, as well as from the Alaska Peninsula right on up into the interior. General area of rain up there over the North Slope Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. Mostly dry for the Panhandle and the extreme eastern interior. And then for tomorrow, this front just edges eastward a little bit there, western Cook Inlet, so periods of rain, south central Alaska, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, Susitna Valley, Manuska Valley, Prince William Sound, right through the central interior, all the way up to the Brooks Range and eastern Arctic coast. Another day much like today here for the southeast coast, partly to mostly sunny central southern areas, and isolated showers up to the north with high pressure pretty much dominating the Aleutians, and actually the Bering Sea pretty quiet, just a weak trough out there that may bring a couple of bands of light rain, fog, and drizzle in across Atka Island on Sunday, and another one back there farther to the west. Otherwise, a trough with showers here extending from the northern Kuskokwim Valley up into the Nenana Fairbanks area, across the Yukon Flats, and still looks kind of damp and unsettled for the North Slope there, but dry for the Arctic coast. It'll be mostly cloudy with some scattered showers around southern Alaska. A drier day on Sunday than tomorrow will be. And the Copper River Basin mostly dry, mostly sunny here for the southeast coast. Coastal water forecast, northwest winds on the south coast of the Panhandle at about 20 knots. And then westerlies on the central coast at 20 knots with west winds 15 to 25 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, southerlies 15 knots, Stevens Passage, southwest at 10, and northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. For Sunday, northwest winds, central and south coast, 20 knots, seas about 6 feet. Clarence Strait, northwest at 15 knots, northwest at 10 for Stevens Passage, and Lynn Canal, southerlies at 15 knots. And the north coast here, west northwesterlies at 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. And then for Cook Inlet on Saturday, looking at small craft advisories, a good stiff south wind at 30 knots from Kamishak Bay right into northern Cook Inlet, and south 15 for Prince William Sound. North Gulf Coast, west-southwest winds at 15 knots, south at 20 for the Barren Islands. And for Sunday, the southerly winds drop off, 15-20 knots for Cook Inlet, south of 15 for Kamishak Bay, south at about 20 for the Barren Islands, and south-southwest 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. South winds 10 knots with 2 foot seas. Small craft advisories for Kodiak Island on Saturday, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots, Bristol Bay southwest at 15, and Bering Sea side, the Alaska Peninsula, light variable winds at 10 knots, variable 15 for the Pacific side. And then for Sunday, variable winds, 10 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, seas 2 to 3 feet, southwest at 10 knots for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island, east winds 15 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians for Saturday, north to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, light variable winds for Adak and Atka at 10 knots, seas down to 2 to 5 feet, and then west-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots for the western Aleutians. And for Sunday, we've got small craft advisories coming into the western Aleutians from Shimia to Kiska at 25 knots from the southwest, otherwise west-southwest 15 to 20, turned west at 15 to 20 knots for Adak and Atka. Eastern Aleutians variable due west winds at 10 to 15 knots. Southwest coast, 15-knot winds out of the west for the day Saturday, and about the same for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, but call it 20 knots, and 20 knots out of the west for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs, west winds 15 knots. And for the day Sunday, Pribilofs, west winds 15 knots, southwest 10 to 15 knot winds for the southwest coast. Light west winds, St. Lawrence Island at 10, and light variable winds for Norton Sound. Pribilof Islands west at 15, St. Matthew Island southwest at 15. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast for tomorrow, east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, northeast at about 15 for the central coast. Northeast winds 25 knots for the western Arctic coast, and the Chukchi Sea north winds 25 knots. And for the day Sunday, Chukchi Sea north winds 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. Light northwest breeze at 10 knots for the central and western Arctic coast. Otherwise, the east side here looking at east winds 10 to 20 knots.